I sit under studio lights so bright they feel like a physical weight, a warm pressure on my skin that seems to melt the years right off my face. They are utterly unforgiving, promising to expose every lie, every insecurity, but for the first time in my life, I have nothing to hide. A small, cool microphone is clipped to the collar of my silk blouse, and I can feel its metallic presence against my collarbone. A tiny anchor in a sea of overwhelming newness. 3 cameras, black and silent like mechanical predators, swivel and glide on silent tracks. One is directly in front of me, its red light a staring, unblinking eye. The host, a woman whose face I've seen on magazine covers and late-night television for years, says my name. She says Calla Renner, and the sound of it in this space, amplified and echoing with a tone of respect, is so foreign that for a half-second I don't recognize it. It's the name my family used to whisper, a synonym for disappointment, a name spoken with a sigh and a shake of the head. Now it's being followed by a list of praises. My work, my company, my story, all of this is happening live, broadcast to millions of people. My heart is a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands are steady in my lap. But what truly makes my breath catch, what makes the carefully constructed composure I've built over the last 3 years threaten to shatter, isn't the lights or the cameras or the fame. It's a face in the front row of the studio audience. It's my sister, Ramsey. Her expression is utterly blank, a canvas wiped clean of the smug certainty it usually wore. Her hands, the same hands that used to gesture dismissively at me, that pointed and laughed, are in her lap, and I can see her fingers trembling from here. The tremor is violent, a small earthquake of disbelief running through her. A decade of her voice echoes in my head, a phantom chorus of insults. She was the one who told our cousins I was a pathetic loser, a weirdo hermit who would die alone in Mom and Dad's basement. She was the one who told our entire extended family that no man would ever want me, that I was destined to become nothing more than a cautionary tale. She had painted a picture of my failure with such vivid, cruel strokes that even I had started to believe it. Now she can't speak. The muscles in her jaw are tight, but her mouth hangs slightly open. Her face, usually tanned and glowing from weekend trips to the beach club, has gone completely, shockingly pale. It's the color of chalk, of bone. It's the color of a person who has just seen a ghost. And in a way she has. She's seeing the ghost of the sister she thought she'd buried under years of mockery. Because directly behind me, projected onto a massive wall-sized screen for her and the entire world to see, is my title. It's not Family Hermit. It's not Troll Under the Stairs. It's 5 simple, devastating words, CEO of Ember Point Media Group. And underneath that, a tagline the show's producers wrote themselves. The woman who built an empire in silence. Ramsey's eyes are fixed on that screen, and I can see the moment the words finally register. It's like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The denial, the confusion, the dawning, horrifying comprehension. Everything she thought she knew about me, about her place in the world and mine, has just been publicly, spectacularly demolished. But this story, my story, it didn't start here, on a brightly lit stage with the scent of victory in the air. This is just the epilogue. The real story started in a place with no cameras and no audience, except for the people I once called my world. It began in a crowded dining room, on a Tuesday night. It began on my father's 65th birthday. It began the night Ramsey stood up, held her wine glass high, and delivered a toast designed to publicly execute what little was left of my self-worth. That was the night she called me a nobody in front of everyone we knew. And that was the moment I decided, with a calmness that frightened me, that I'd never sit at her table again. I would build my own, and I would make sure it was a table she could never ever afford a seat at. My name is Calla Renner, and for the first 26 years of my life, I was the quiet one. Not quiet in a mysterious, intriguing way, but quiet in the way a piece of forgotten furniture is quiet. I was just there, the designated failure in a family of sparkling successes. I held a degree in communications, a fact my family found endlessly ironic, given I barely spoke and had no job to show for it. I was a writer with nothing published, a dreamer with no prospects, My life had stalled out spectacularly after my dad's stroke 2 years prior. While he recovered, the family finances took a nosedive, and my grand plans of moving to a big city to start my career evaporated. Instead, I moved into my parents' garage, which they'd hastily converted into a room with a bed, a desk, and a persistent scent of motor oil and dust. My siblings, of course, were shiny and loud, their lives runway success stories. My older sister Ramsey was the undisputed queen bee, married to a corporate lawyer, mother of 2 perfect children, and mistress of a pristine suburban house with a garden that looked like it was ripped from a magazine. She radiated competence and judgment in equal measure. My younger brother Jace was the newly crowned prince, having just landed a coveted, high-paying job at a tech startup in Austin. He spoke in a dialect of acronyms and stock options that I couldn't begin to decipher. That night was Dad's 65th birthday, a landmark that demanded a grand celebration. The house was overflowing, cousins I hadn't seen in years, boisterous in-laws, old neighbors who pinched my cheek and asked if I remembered them. And, in a special twist of fate designed to maximize my discomfort, my ex-boyfriend Lucas was there. He was now married to Ramsey's best friend, a woman who looked like a Barbie doll brought to life. He gave me a tight, awkward hug that felt more like a pat-down. And me? I was a ghost at the feast, haunting the edges of the celebration, in a $14 thrifted dress that felt both too tight and too loose at the same time. The dining room table, extended with 2 extra leaves, was still not big enough, so I found myself holding my plate, leaning against a wall, trying to look casual and not like the social leper I was. Then came the toasts. Jace went first, then Dad's best friend, then Ramsey. She stood up, glass of expensive red wine in hand, a benevolent smile on her face. She was in her element. She thanked everyone for coming. She praised Mom for organizing the beautiful dinner. She gushed about Dad, our hero. She congratulated Jace on his new job. She even gave a shout-out to Lucas and his wife, welcoming them to the family. She thanked everyone, it seemed, in the entire Western Hemisphere. Everyone except me. I stood against the wall, my plate of cooling food in my hands, and I became invisible. But she wasn't done. She wasn't content with simple omission. She needed to salt the wound, and I think we should all give a special thanks to my little sister Kala, she said, her voice dripping with mock affection. The room turned to look at me. I felt 100 pairs of eyes land on my cheap dress, my plate, my awkward stance. She's been such a trooper, keeping Mom and Dad company while the rest of us are out building our lives. Every family needs a hermit, right? A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the room. She wasn't finished. She took another sip of wine, looked directly at me, and delivered the killing blow. At least someone's keeping the home fires burning. Every castle needs a troll under the stairs, right? This time, the laughter was louder. Real laughter. My cousin Mark howled. Lucas had the decency to look at his shoes, but his wife giggled. Even my own mother, my gentle, kind mother, gave a soft, pained chuckle, a sound of social capitulation that broke my heart more than Ramsey's cruelty. My dad, still a bit foggy from his medication, just beamed, proud of his witty, confident daughter holding court. I didn't cry. I didn't flush with anger. I felt something far worse, a profound and sudden emptiness. I smiled. I even nodded as if I was in on the joke, but inside, something cold and hard snapped into place. A circuit breaker flipped. The part of me that craved their approval, that yearned for a seat at their table, died right there against that wall. I wasn't angry. I was done. Utterly and completely done. I waited for the laughter to subside, then quietly said, "Excuse me." I navigated through the crowd, placed my half-eaten slice of cake on the kitchen counter, and walked out the back door, across the damp lawn to the garage. That was the night I promised myself one thing. A silent, solemn vow made in the dark. I will never beg for a seat at their table again. I'll own the damn table. The weeks that followed the birthday dinner were a thick, suffocating fog of shame. It felt like Ramsey's words had seeped into the very air I breathed, branding me not just in the eyes of my family, but the world. Even our neighbor's golden retriever, a dog named Buddy, who usually greeted me with frantic tail wags, now seemed to look at me with a sort of pity, a sad tilt of his head that said, "Oh, it's you, the troll." The humiliation was a constant, low-grade fever. Ramsay, of course, amplified it online. She posted a carousel of perfectly curated photos from the party on her Instagram. There was the smiling group shot, minus me, of course. There was Ramsay and Jace, arms around each other, beaming. The caption was a masterpiece of passive aggression. So incredibly grateful for our wonderful, successful family. So blessed to have people who are out there making things happen. Each like on that post felt like a tiny stone being thrown at me. I was trapped in the garage, but the world had ways of reminding me of my place. I had no money. My savings had dwindled to nothing. My communications degree felt like a worthless piece of paper. So I started with the only assets I had left. A small pile of old college textbooks. I hauled them to the university bookstore and sold them for a pittance. The $120 I got felt like a fortune. I took that money straight to a pawn shop and bought the cheapest, oldest, heaviest second-hand laptop they had. It whirred like a tiny jet engine and took 5 minutes to boot up, but it had a working internet connection. It was my key, my escape route. I began my education in the dead of night, when the house was silent and the weight of my family's judgment felt furthest away. I didn't enroll in a course. I couldn't afford one. My university became YouTube. My professors were ambitious strangers filming tutorials in their spare bedrooms. I devoured everything I could find on copywriting, content strategy, search engine optimization. I filled a spiral notebook with frantic, barely legible notes, my handwriting a testament to my desperation. I watched videos at 2 in the morning, the blue light of the laptop screen painting my face in the dark, the whirring fan the only sound besides my own breathing. Every day, I put the theory into practice. I wrote. I filled a dozen Google Docs with terrible blog posts about topics I knew nothing about. Then slowly, they became less terrible. I learned to structure an argument, to write a compelling headline, to embed keywords naturally. Then came the next, most painful step: cold emails. I sent hundreds of them, personalized, meticulously researched emails to small business owners, marketing managers, anyone I thought might need help. "Hello, my name is Kala Renner. I noticed your website, and I have some ideas." Most were met with a crushing digital silence. No replies, not even a no thank you. Each day I'd walk into the main house for a cup of coffee, and my mother's hopeful, pitying face would greet me. "Looking for jobs today, dear?" she'd ask, her voice gentle. Jace, if he was visiting, would be less subtle. He'd glance up from his phone and mutter to no one in particular. "She's looking for Wi-Fi." Ramsay would swing by on weekends, a queen visiting her most pathetic subject. She'd peer into the garage, a smirk playing on her lips. "Still typing away in your little cave, Kala? Don't you ever get tired of playing on the computer?" I'd just smile and nod. Something like that, I'd say. Because I wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't just looking for a job. I was building something. A weapon. An escape hatch. An empire. And they were all completely, blissfully blind to it. Then, one night, nestled among the rejections and the silence, was a reply. A wedding planner in Oregon. She needed 3 blog posts about choosing a rustic wedding venue. She'd pay $80. It was tiny. It was almost nothing, but it was mine. That first PayPal notification, the simple green text confirming the deposit, was like a match being struck in the darkness of that garage. It wasn't about the money. It was proof. Proof that somewhere, out there in the world, my words had value. Proof that I wasn't a hermit. I was a professional. I found Alistair Vaughan in the unlikeliest of places, a niche subreddit for freelance writers. It was a digital back alley, full of desperate beginners and cynical veterans. He had posted a question, something incredibly technical about the ethics of ghostwriting for C-suite executives. His query was sharp, intelligent, and cut through the usual noise of the forum. I spent an hour crafting a reply, pulling from the obscure marketing theory I'd been obsessively studying. I didn't just answer his question, I challenged one of his underlying assumptions. A few hours later, a direct message notification popped up. It was from him. His profile picture was just a black square. His username was a string of random consonants. His message was brutally direct. I read your post on the ghostwriting thread. Then I found the link to your portfolio in your Reddit bio. It's mostly garbage. My heart sank. Here it was. Another rejection. But then came the second line. But you're raw. You think strategically. You're not just a word filler. Have you ever seriously considered learning conversion writing? Conversion writing, the art of using words to make people click, buy, and sign up. It was the mercenary end of the writing world, and it was fascinating. I admitted I'd only read a few articles about it. He messaged back instantly. Good. Less I have to unteach you. I'm going to give you a challenge. I have a client, a small e-commerce brand that sells artisanal soaps. Their landing page isn't converting. I'm sending you the link. Rewrite it. You have 24 hours. No please. No thank you. Just a command. For the next day, I didn't sleep. I lived inside the world of artisanal soap. I researched their target audience, their competitors. I dissected their existing page, identifying every weak headline, every confusing call to action. I poured every ounce of my newfound knowledge into that rewrite. I sent it to him with 3 minutes to spare, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. His reply didn't come for 6 hours. I spent that time pacing the concrete floor of the garage, convinced I had failed. Then, a notification. His message wasn't, "Good job," or "This is great." It was a screenshot of a PayPal payment for $200. The message below it was pure Alistair. It's not perfect. Your closing is weak, but your headline increased the click-through rate in my initial test by 18%. Want to learn how to make $2,000 for a page like this? My fingers trembled as I typed back. Yes. That's when he made his offer. It wasn't a gentle invitation. It was a contract forged in steel. I'll mentor you, he wrote. I'll teach you everything I know about direct response, funnel psychology, offer stacking, everything you need to become a 6-figure copywriter. But it's not free. I want 10% of every dollar you earn for the next 12 months. And if you waste my time, if you give up, if you don't do the work, I will personally see to it that you are blacklisted from every serious agency I know. It was the harshest job offer imaginable. He was offering to hand me the keys to the kingdom, but if I fumbled them, he'd lock the gates forever. There was no safety net. But after Ramsey's toast, after the pitying looks, and the soul-crushing silence, harshness felt like a gift. It was honest. He wasn't my family, sugarcoating their condescension. He was a professional who saw potential and was offering me a brutal but clear path forward. I agreed without a moment of hesitation. The next year was the most grueling period of my life. Alistair was a relentless mentor. He tore apart my writing, shredded my assumptions, and pushed me to my absolute limit. I wrote, and rewrote again. I learned how to build entire sales funnels, how to write email sequences that felt like personal conversations, how to craft ad copy that could stop a thumb from scrolling. My first big test was for a new sunglasses brand. Alistair handed me the project and said, "Don't mess this up." I wrote everything. The website copy, the launch emails, the social media ads. The night of the launch, I watched the sales numbers climb in real time on a shared dashboard. They tripled their revenue forecast in the first weekend. I had done that. My words. And all the while, my family saw nothing. I was still just Kala, the quiet girl in the garage, staring at a screen, watching Netflix for all they knew. They had no idea I was in the middle of a brutal, transformative apprenticeship, becoming sharper, stronger, and more dangerous with every word I typed. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. It was from a woman whose voice was so polished and professional, it made the damp air in my garage feel even grittier. She was the chief marketing officer for a mid-tier skincare company, the kind you see in glossy magazines but can't quite afford. Alistair had passed my name along. Their brand was stale, their online presence a digital graveyard. They were planning a massive relaunch, and they needed a voice, not just a few blog posts. They needed everything. Their entire web presence, from the homepage to the thank you email after a purchase. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a small-time gig. This was the big leagues. During the video call, I strategically angled my laptop so they could only see the clean white wall behind me, not the dusty lawnmower or my father's old tool chest. The CMO laid out the project, and with every sentence, the imposter syndrome screamed in my head. You can't do this. You're a fraud. You live in a garage. But another voice, a newer, calmer one that sounded a lot like Alistair, was cutting through the noise. Analyze the problem, identify the weak points, present a strategy. So I did. I talked about their customer journey, their value proposition, their lack of a cohesive narrative. By the end of the call, the CMO was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You sound like you know our brand better than we do. The job is yours. The budget for the copy is $18,000. I almost choked. $18,000. It was more than my father had made in the 6 months before his stroke. It was a life-changing amount of money. The weeks that followed were a blur of relentless work. I lived and breathed that skincare brand. My world shrank to the four walls of the garage and the glowing rectangle of my laptop screen. I slept in 3-hour increments, waking up with the imprint of the keyboard on my cheek. The air grew thick with the smell of stale coffee and my own obsessive energy. I wrote thousands of words, landing pages that promised glowing skin, email sequences that built a relationship with the customer, ad copy that was witty and irresistible. I crafted a voice for them that was aspirational but accessible, luxurious but trustworthy. Alistair was my remote general. I'd send him drafts at 3 a.m., and he'd reply within minutes with curt, brilliant feedback. Too much hype here. Focus on the mechanism. The headline is weak. Make it a question. I was his soldier, and this project was our battlefield. The day of the launch felt like my own personal judgment day. I sat in my creaky desk chair, staring at a real-time analytics dashboard the company had given me access to. The site went live at 9 a.m. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. My stomach twisted into a knot of pure dread. I failed. I ruined them. Then the first sale came through, then another, and another. Within an hour, the numbers were moving so fast I could barely track them. People on Twitter were talking about the ads. A beauty blogger with 500,000 followers posted a story about the new website, calling the copy genius. The launch didn't just succeed, it went viral. That evening, I watched the total sales for the day cross the 6-figure mark. They had made over $100,000 in less than 12 hours. A week later, the $18,000 payment landed in my bank account. I stared at the number on my banking app for a long time. It didn't feel real. I looked around the garage at the cobwebs in the corner, the concrete floor, the single exposed light bulb, and for the first time it didn't feel like a prison, it felt like a crucible. A place where I had been broken down and forged into something new. That night, I went into the house to get a glass of water. Jace was home for the weekend, lounging on the sofa. He didn't look up from his phone. "Hey, can I borrow $20?" he asked, his tone casual. I just looked at him for a second, the sheer, staggering irony of the moment washing over me. I had just made more than his monthly salary in a single project, and he was asking me for pocket money. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a 20, and handed it to him. "Sure," I said. "No problem." The $18,000 didn't stay in my bank account for long. The very next day, I had a call with Alistair. I was expecting a congratulations, maybe even a rare good job. Instead, he was all business. "So you've proven you can do the work," he said, his voice sharp over the phone. "Now you have a choice. You can keep being a high-paid freelancer, trading your time for money until you burn out, or you can build something bigger." He let the statement hang in the air. "You can't scale yourself, Kala. You need a team. You need a company." From freelancer to agency owner. The leap felt terrifying, like stepping off a cliff. But Alistair had a way of making the impossible seem merely difficult. He laid out the steps, not as a suggestion, but as a battle plan. And so the transition began. The next phase of my life wasn't glamorous. It was paperwork. It was late-night calls with a budget lawyer I found online, learning about LLCs and tax IDs. It was spending hours trying to come up with a name. I didn't want something corporate and soulless. It had to mean something. I settled on Ember Point Media Group. Ember, for that tiny $80 spark from the wedding planner that had started this whole fire, and Point, for the sharp, direct, no-nonsense strategy that Alistair had drilled into me. It was my story, codified into a brand name. Next came the hiring. The idea of being a boss was almost comical. Me, Calla the hermit, managing other people? I posted a listing for 2 paid remote interns on a university job board. I conducted interviews over Zoom from the garage, my professional blazer on top, pajama pants on the bottom. I was so nervous my voice shook during the first interview, but I remembered what Alistair taught me: focus on strategy. I didn't ask them about their grades. I gave them a small, hypothetical marketing problem and asked them how they'd solve it. I hired 2 bright, ambitious young women, one in Ohio and one in California. Suddenly, I wasn't just Calla anymore. I was a CEO. I reinvested a huge chunk of the skincare money into the business. I bought subscriptions for project management tools like Asana and Slack. Our digital office started to take shape. I bought a premium Zoom account. I outsourced graphic design to a contractor in the Philippines. I was building an infrastructure, a machine, and the machine was growing. Our first team meetings were awkward. I stumbled over my words, trying to sound like the leader I was supposed to be. But the work was solid. With my interns handling research and first drafts, I could focus on high-level strategy and closing new clients, and they came. A sustainable fashion brand, a financial tech app, a gourmet coffee subscription box. My secret life was becoming more complex, more real, than my visible one. The contrast was a source of quiet, constant power. Ramsay would drop by, unannounced as always, and peer into the garage. "Still playing on your little computer, Calla?" she asked one afternoon, her tone laced with that familiar, weary condescension. "You should really get out and get some sun. It's not healthy to be cooped up in here all day." I just smiled, a genuine calm smile. "I'm okay, Ramsay. I like it in here." She shook her head and walked away, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just interrupted a strategy meeting for Ember Point Media Group, a company that was now quietly managing $250,000 in client contracts. Jace came home one weekend, buzzing with the kind of manic, messianic energy only a young tech founder can possess. He was launching his own app, something to do with gamifying personal finance for millennials. He was bursting with jargon, talking about burn rates and user acquisition funnels and his pre-seed funding round. He saw me in the kitchen and waved a flash drive at me. "Calla, perfect. You're good with words, right?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "I have to send my pitch deck to a big VC firm on Monday. Can you just give it a quick proofread, check for typos and stuff?" The request was so dismissive, so emblematic of how he saw me. A convenient, unemployed English major. Not a professional, not an expert, just a pair of eyes to catch his spelling mistakes. I took the flash drive without a word. That night, I opened the file. It was a disaster. Not just typos, but a fundamental misunderstanding of storytelling. The copy was dense and confusing. The value proposition was buried on slide 8. His ask was unclear. It was a classic case of a product person trying to do a marketer's job. My professional instincts, honed by Alistair's brutal training, took over. I could have just fixed the typos, as requested, but I couldn't. It was like watching someone try to perform surgery with a butter knife. So quietly, without ego, I started to work. I didn't just proofread, I restructured the entire narrative. So I rewrote the headline on the first slide to be punchy and compelling. I moved the value proposition front and center. I clarified the market opportunity and sharpened the call to action on the final slide. I turned his jumbled collection of features into a powerful story about solving a problem. I saved the new version, sent it back to him, and simply said, "Here you go, let me know if you need anything else." He barely glanced at it. "Oh, thanks," he texted back. "Looks a bit better." He presented it to the venture capital firm the next day. I didn't hear anything else about it, and assumed that was that. Jace went back to Austin, and I went back to managing my growing roster of clients. Then a week later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was, "Jace Renner's pitch deck." My blood ran cold. I thought it was from Jace, maybe telling me I'd messed something up. But the sender was a name I didn't recognize. I opened it. The email was from Jace's co-founder. It was short and to the point. Jace, I hope you don't mind me reaching out to your sister directly. We presented the deck you polished up for us, and the difference was night and day from our previous versions. The partners at the VC firm specifically commented on how clear and compelling the narrative was. Jace mentioned his sister gave it a look. Kala, I have to ask, are you for hire? It was validation from the last place I expected it, my brother's own world. A world that had, until now, been completely impenetrable to me. I had a call with the co-founder the next day. He was smart, respectful, and clearly impressed. He didn't see me as Jace's little sister. He saw me as a strategic asset. They offered me a $10,000 contract to overhaul all of their marketing materials ahead of their official launch. I accepted professionally, calmly. As I hung up, I could hear my mother in the other room, on the phone with my aunt. "Oh, Jace is doing so well," she was saying. "His new company is just taking off. He's a natural." I walked to my laptop and deposited the check from his own company into the Ember Point Media business account. The silence wasn't just armor anymore, it was my secret weapon. The offer was the kind that tests a person's soul. It came from a new cryptocurrency company, one of those flashy, aggressive startups that seem to spring out of nowhere with millions in funding. They wanted Emberpoint to run their entire launch campaign. The project was massive, the timeline was insane, and the fee was astronomical, $50,000 for 1 month of work. $50,000, that number echoed in my mind. It was escape velocity money. It was enough to get me out of the garage for good, to rent a beautiful apartment in a city with a skyline, to finally tangibly prove to myself that I had made it. But as I read through their project brief, red flags started popping up everywhere. They were vague about the technology behind their coin. They wanted us to use marketing language that felt deceptive, making promises of guaranteed returns. They were less interested in building a community and more interested in creating a short-term hype cycle, a classic pump-and-dump scheme dressed up in corporate language. My gut clenched. This wasn't building something. This was demolition. My internal conflict was a raging storm. The $50,000 represented a finish line. It was the "I told you so" I'd been working towards. I could practically feel the plush carpet of a new apartment under my feet. But then I pictured the faces of the people who would buy into the hype, everyday investors who would lose their savings when the whole thing inevitably collapsed. I thought about the kind of company I was building. Was Emberpoint just a gun for hire, available to the highest bidder, regardless of their ethics? I scheduled a call with Alistair. I laid out the whole situation, the money, the red flags, my own churning indecision. I expected him to give me a clear directive, to tell me what to do. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the words that would become a new compass for me. "It's your company, Kala. It's your call. The money is real. Just make sure you can sleep at night." He wasn't giving me an answer. He was reminding me that I was the one who had to live with the consequences. The decision was agonizing. I sat in the garage, a contract worth $50,000 open on one screen, my own company's mission statement, which I had just written a week before, open on the other. It talked about authentic storytelling and sustainable growth. The crypto contract was the antithesis of all of that. An empire built on a foundation of lies wasn't an empire, it was just a prettier cage. With a deep breath, I typed out the email. It was polite, professional, and firm. "Thank you for the generous offer," I wrote. "Unfortunately, this project doesn't align with our company's current strategic focus. We wish you the best of luck with your launch." I hit send, and a wave of nausea and regret washed over me. Had I just made the stupidest, most naive mistake of my career? For 2 days I was convinced I had. Then, a new email appeared. It was from a woman who ran a large nonprofit dedicated to adult literacy programs. She had gotten my name from the CEO of the skincare company. "I was so impressed with the story you built for them," she wrote. "We're looking for a partner who understands how to build a narrative with integrity." We had a call the next day. Her project was the polar opposite of the crypto launch. It was about changing lives, about giving people the tools to build their own futures. The work was meaningful. It resonated with the deepest parts of my own story. And at the end of the call, she offered us a year-long retainer contract. The total value, $120,000. It was more than twice the crypto money. And it was stable, long-term work that I could be deeply proud of. That was the moment I truly understood. Integrity wasn't a liability, it was a filter. Turning down the wrong money had made space for the right money to find me. I wasn't just building a profitable company anymore. I was building a real one. The phone call that shattered my secret world came from a name I didn't recognize. A woman with a quick, energetic voice who introduced herself as a journalist from a major online publication. She was writing a feature series, she explained, called Women Who Built Empires Online. My name, she said, had come up several times in her research. My stomach did a slow, sickening flip. My entire strategy, my power, was derived from silence and anonymity. Being the subject of a feature article was the equivalent of setting off a flare in the dead of night. My first instinct was to say no. I'm flattered, I managed to say, but I prefer to keep a low profile. I was about to end the call when she said something that stopped me. I understand, but the CEO of the skincare brand you worked with told me your story is the entire reason she took a chance on her own relaunch. She said you deserve to have your story told. I thought about it. I had been building in the dark for so long. Maybe it was time to own what I'd built in the light. I talked it over with Alistair. You can't stay in the garage forever, he said, more gently than usual. An empire needs a queen, and queens don't hide. I agreed to the interview. A week later, a large white van pulled up in my parents' driveway. A crew of 3 people began unloading professional cameras, light stands, and sound equipment. The suburban tranquility of our quiet street was shattered. Neighbors who usually just gave a polite wave now slowed their cars, staring. Mrs. Gable from across the street was overtly trimming her hedges, her eyes fixed on the commotion. The secret was no longer a secret. It was a public spectacle. And then, as if summoned by the scent of drama, Ramsey's pearl-white SUV turned the corner. She hadn't been invited. She hadn't even been told. She parked her car and marched up the driveway, her face a mask of annoyed confusion. "Kala, what on earth is all of this?" she demanded, her voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She surveyed the professional crew with a look of deep suspicion. "Did you win some kind of contest? Are you running some weird little giveaway blog or something?" The insult was so automatic, so ingrained in her way of speaking to me, that she didn't even realize how condescending it sounded. I took a deep breath. The journalist was standing right there, notepad in hand. The camera was powered on, though not yet rolling. This was a crossroads. I could downplay it, deflect, and try to manage her reaction, or I could simply state the truth. I chose the truth. I looked my sister directly in the eye, my voice calm and even, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "No, Ramsey," I said, my words clear and precise. "I run a media firm. They're here to interview me about it. We just signed a licensing deal for one of our client campaigns with a major streaming platform." The effect was not what I expected. There was no shock, no dawning comprehension. There was only a scoff, a short, sharp, ugly sound of disbelief. She rolled her eyes, a gesture I had seen 1,000 times before. "You? A media firm? Kala, please," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Be serious for 1 second. What's really going on?" She genuinely could not compute the information. The sister she had so carefully constructed in her mind, the hermit, the troll, the failure, was incapable of such a reality. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to convince her. I simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the journalist, who immediately signaled the cameraman. I turned my back on my sister's sputtering disbelief and began the interview. I let the cameras roll. I let them capture my story. And I let them capture Ramsey standing alone in the driveway, her face slowly transforming from arrogance to confusion as the undeniable professional reality of the situation unfolded around her. Her denial was no longer a private family matter. It was about to become part of the public record. The article was published a week later, and the fallout was immediate. My phone buzzed with texts from cousins and old family friends, all expressing a shocked, slightly bewildered form of congratulations. The story of the quiet girl in the garage building a secret empire was, it turned out, a compelling one. But the article was just the appetizer. The main course arrived via an email from a producer at a national morning talk show. They had read the feature. They wanted to have me on for a live, in-studio interview. My first reaction was a visceral gut punch of fear. This was a level of exposure that made the article seem like a whisper. This was millions of people. Live television. No editing, no takebacks. My thumb hovered over the reply button, ready to type a polite no thank you. But then I paused. I thought about Ramsey's scoff in the driveway. I thought about Jace asking for $20. I thought about the years of being invisible at my own family's table. I had built my empire in silence. Maybe it was time to claim it with a roar. The garage was for building. The stage was for owning. I wrote back and accepted. Then came the producer's follow-up request, the one that turned the interview from a business opportunity into an act of personal reckoning. "This is wonderful news," she wrote. "We'd love to have your family in the studio audience. The secret empire angle is fantastic, and seeing their faces when we reveal the scale of your success would make for an incredible television moment." I knew exactly what she meant. They didn't just want a success story, they wanted the drama. They wanted the reaction shot. A younger version of me would have been horrified, a pawn in their game, but the Kala who had stared down a $50,000 temptation and built a company from nothing saw an opportunity. I wouldn't be a pawn. I would be the queen. I would orchestrate the whole damn thing. I personally invited them all. My mom and dad, who were confused but proud, Jace, who was suddenly very interested in his brilliant sister, and Ramsey. I didn't just text Ramsey. I went onto a black car service app and booked an Uber XL, the most expensive option, to pick her and her husband up and drive them to the studio in the city. It was a gesture of largesse, a power move disguised as a thoughtful courtesy. Her interpretation of the gesture was exactly what I'd anticipated. She saw it as me being nervous, out of my depth, needing my sophisticated older sister to come and hold my hand. She was framing the entire event in her mind as her being the gracious chaperone for her quirky little sister's moment in the spotlight. I could picture her telling her friends, "Poor Kala is so overwhelmed, of course I have to be there for her." The day of the show, I got ready with a strange sense of calm. I wasn't nervous about the interview itself. I had spent years mastering the art of communication, just not in a way any of them had ever recognized. As I did my makeup, I imagined Ramsey preparing for her own performance. I could see her selecting her most expensive pearl necklace, her most tastefully powerful dress. She wasn't dressing to support me, she was dressing for her role as the de facto matriarch, the successful sister benevolently overseeing my cute little hustle. The Uber driver texted me when he picked her up. I could imagine her settling into the black leather seats, her husband beside her, making a call. "Don't worry," she'd be saying into her phone. "It's just a little morning show. I'll make sure Kala doesn't say anything embarrassing." The dramatic irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. She had no idea she wasn't on her way to a celebration. She was on her way to a coronation, and she was about to be the most shocked subject in the entire kingdom. The studio was a world away from my garage. It was a universe of controlled chaos, of hurried people with headsets, of impossibly bright lights that hummed with energy. The live audience was buzzing, a sea of expectant faces. And there I was, sitting on a plush white sofa across from a woman whose face was famous around the world. I felt strangely, unnervingly at home. I was poised, I was prepared, I was ready. The host introduced me, her voice warm and enthusiastic. But she didn't introduce me as Kala Renner, a writer from a small town. She introduced me as the founder and CEO of Ember Point Media Group, a multi-million-dollar agency she built from scratch. The words hung in the air, charged with significance. I saw the camera pan to my family in the front row. Ramsey was smiling, a tight, polite, patronizing smile. The kind of smile you give a child who has just shown you a macaroni necklace. Then, The massive screen behind the host flickered to life. It wasn't just a logo, it was a slickly produced montage of my work. Glowing testimonials from the CEOs of brands I had transformed. The skincare executive appeared via a crisp satellite feed. Calla Renner didn't just write good copy for us, she said, her expression earnest and full of gratitude. She saved our company. Her strategy is the reason we're a market leader today. The camera cut back to Ramsey. The polite smile was frozen on her face, but a small, almost imperceptible crack had appeared in her perfect facade. This was clearly bigger than a cute little hustle. The host then turned to me, her expression shifting to one of journalistic curiosity. She leaned forward slightly. Calla, your story is incredible because you did all of this in secret. Tell me, how did your family support you on this amazing journey? The entire audience leaned in. The studio fell silent. This was the moment. The reason the producers had flown my family here. I took a breath. I didn't look at Ramsey. I looked directly at the host, my voice gentle, devoid of any malice, but laced with an undeniable crystalline truth. They didn't actually know, I said, my tone even and calm. I was very, very quiet about it for a long time. I paused, letting the statement land, but in a way, I have to thank them. They gave me the one thing I needed most to succeed. The host tilted her head. And what was that? She asked. And what was that? She asked. I finally allowed my eyes to flick towards the front row, just for a second, before turning back. They gave me the silence I needed to build. On cue, the director in the control room cut to a tight shot of Ramsey's face. It was a masterclass in televised devastation. Her jaw didn't just drop, it went completely slack, her mouth falling open in a silent, horrified "oh." The healthy, confident color drained from her face, leaving behind a pale, sickly, chalk-white mask. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on me, filled with a dawning, catastrophic horror. She was seeing not just her successful sister, but the colossal scale of her own misjudgment, broadcast live on national television. A low murmur rippled through the audience. They could feel it, the raw, unfiltered family drama playing out in front of them. Ramsey's mind, catching up to the public humiliation, tried to force a recovery. She attempted to rearrange her features into a smile, a desperate plea to the camera that she was in on it, that she was proud, but it was a grotesque failure. A twitching, horrifying grimace that didn't come close to reaching her panicked, empty eyes. I didn't need to watch her. I kept my gaze fixed on the host, my expression serene, my posture perfect. I had built my case. The cameras had captured the verdict. The fall was public, it was total, and it was broadcast in high definition. The moment the show cut to commercial, the atmosphere shifted. I was immediately surrounded by producers and crew members, all congratulating me, their faces beaming. The host squeezed my hand and whispered, "That was incredible television." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a studio assistant quietly lead my family, a shell-shocked Ramsey, a confused dad, and a pale-faced mom out a side exit, away from the clapping audience and curious eyes. The Uber ride back for them must have been a tomb of silent, suffocating tension. For me, the ride back to my hotel was a blur of adrenaline and quiet, profound relief. The real aftershock, however, hit digitally. My phone, which I had put on silent, lit up like a Christmas tree. The family group chat, dormant for months, had exploded. Jace was first, his message a string of capital letters and exclamation points. WTF, Calla? A multi-million-dollar company? Why didn't you say anything? Then my mother, her text more measured but trembling with confusion. Calla, honey, we need to talk. I had no idea. And then came the voice note from Ramsey. It was over 2 minutes long. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. Her voice was a ragged, rambling torrent of accusation, self-pity, and sheer panic desperation. "How could you do this to me, Calla?" she began, her voice cracking. "You made me look like a fool, on national television. We're your family. You're supposed to tell us these things. You should have told me. You should have shared your success. We could have helped you." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She wanted to share in the success she had never once believed was possible. I listened to the entire message, every last second of her unraveling. When it was over, I didn't call her back. I didn't record a voice note of my own. I opened the group chat, where Jace and my mother were still typing frantic, unanswered questions. I typed a single sentence. "You didn't want to know." I hit send. The chat went silent. The simple, undeniable truth of that statement hung in the digital air between us, a final, unassailable judgment. Later that evening, a private text from my mother came through. "I am so proud of you. I am so sorry I didn't see it." I stared at the words, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of warmth towards her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Jace called, his voice now oozing with a sycophantic excitement. "Kala, so I've got this new app idea, and I was thinking, with your resources and my vision," he was already trying to leverage me, to turn my triumph into his opportunity. I cut him off, my voice polite but firm. "Jace, I'm so glad things are going well for you, but I'm not mixing business with family." The line went quiet for a beat. He wasn't used to me setting boundaries. Ramsey's final attempt came via email a few days later. The subject line was, "Let's collaborate. Women's Empowerment Charity Event." She was trying to pivot, to publicly align herself with my new powerful persona. She pitched an idea for an event, with the two of us as co-hosts. It was a desperate, transparent attempt to rewrite history. I knew what my response had to be. I replied to her email, quoting her own words back to her. "I'm sorry, Ramsey, but I don't partner with people who think I live under stairs." I hit send. And then, I blocked her number. The door to that part of my life, the part that lived in her shadow, was finally irrevocably closed. I didn't buy a flashy penthouse in the city. I bought a house on a lake, an hour's drive from the noise. It wasn't a monument to my wealth. It was a sanctuary, a place of peace and light, with large windows that looked out over the calm blue water. The only sounds were the lapping of the waves and the wind in the tall pine trees. This was the antithesis of the garage. It was a space designed for breathing. I spent weeks decorating it, not with expensive art, but with comfortable chairs and shelves overflowing with books. The guest room was my favorite. I painted it a warm, sunny yellow and filled it with light and books and the softest bedding I could find. It was a deliberate, symbolic act. This house would have no trolls under the stairs. It would be a place where visitors felt not like afterthoughts, but like honored guests. And visitors came. I started hosting dinners, not out of obligation, but out of joy. I finally had my own table, and I filled it with my chosen family. Alistair came to the first one, flying in from the coast. He stood on my deck, looking out over the water, a rare, genuine smile on his face. He raised a glass of whiskey. "To the Queen," he said, his voice full of a quiet pride that meant more to me than any television interview. "You built it." My other guests were the new architects of my life, the clients who had become friends, the two interns I had hired from my garage, who were now my full-time project managers, other female founders I had met who understood the struggle and the triumph. The conversation was about ideas, about growth, about the future. There was no judgment, no passive aggression, just a current of mutual respect. Ember Point Media Group was no longer a secret. It was a real, thriving company with a small, beautiful office downtown and 15 full-time employees. We were a team. I still didn't post selfies or brag about my success online. My Instagram was still mostly pictures of my dog and the lake, but the world was taking notice in other ways. One morning, an employee sent me a link with the message, Congrats?" It was the Forbes Top 30 Founders Under 30 list, and my name was on it. I stared at my picture, right there on the iconic website, and I didn't feel a jolt of ego. I felt a quiet sense of rightness. The work was speaking for itself. I didn't need to shout anymore. I often think about that night at my father's birthday party, the girl in the cheap dress holding a plate against the wall. She felt so small, so powerless. She thought their table was the only one that mattered. It took me years to realize that the most powerful thing you can do is not to fight for a seat at someone else's table, but to have the courage to build your own. They called me a hermit because I was quiet, because I was hidden away in that garage. But their definition was wrong. I wasn't hiding from the world. I wasn't surrendering. I was becoming. Never mistake silence for surrender. Some people disappear to become unstoppable. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? Let me know your story in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life glow-ups and stories of sweet, sweet revenge. Until next time, keep building quietly or loudly. Just never stop.